If Jesus were here right now, sitting beside you, breathing the same breath that moves through your thoughts, and he could give you only 3 words to guide you through the chaos, which ones do you believe they would be, and why? The question sounds simple, but it reaches places so deep that you might not even realize at first how much it stirs your soul. Because deep down, each of us carries a silent storm, an inner territory where doubts, fears, and hopes weave themselves into the same fabric. And it is precisely within these dark and delicate spaces that the voice of Jesus tends to whisper, offering a path when the world seems to offer none. The answer to that question can change not only how you face what you're living today, but also how you will see the world from this point forward. Maybe you arrived here because some part of your heart was tired of carrying everything alone, or maybe because you sensed that something greater is waiting to be understood. And when that feeling appears, it almost always points to an invitation Jesus gives using only a few words, yet words that have crossed centuries, stories, falls, and rebirths. Before we begin, hit subscribe, leave a like, and turn on notifications. That way, you'll receive more messages that strengthen your faith and your mind. Now, take a deep breath and come with me. Human fragility was never a mystery to him. Jesus always knew that behind every silence there is a battle, and behind every smile there is an invisible resistance. We are beings searching for meaning while walking on uncertain ground, beings trying to find light while stumbling over our own shadows. That's why he chose words so simple, so direct, and so filled with truth, because he knew the human heart doesn't wake up through long speeches. It needs something that touches it like a calling. Jesus always carried this mysterious strength, the ability to say little and reveal much. His teachings weren't built to impress. They were built to set people free. And among all the phrases, parables, and gestures we know, there are 3 words that continue to echo whenever life grows dark. 3 words that seem to rise exactly in the moment we lose our footing. Maybe you've heard them before, maybe you've even felt them. But today, you're going to experience them differently, not as concepts, but as spiritual seeds ready to take root inside you. And there is something profoundly beautiful about that. Jesus never throws words into the wind. He offers truths that fit exactly where the heart needs them most. Like someone lighting a small flame inside a dark room, he uses only what is necessary for you to see again. That is why, for centuries, these 3 words keep reappearing in moments when life seems to be falling apart, as if they were ancient reminders of an infinite love that refuses to fade. Today, you won't just learn these words, you'll feel how they touch parts of your soul you may have forgotten, parts that were asleep, waiting for a touch of light to wake them again. Because there is something within you, something you may not fully recognize, that knows his voice even before it finishes being spoken. But before revealing those words, we must take an important step. We need to understand why Jesus chose words so simple, yet capable of transforming entire destinies, why he preferred silence over excess, essence over spectacle, whisper over force. Only then can you receive the 3 words exactly as he intended, not as ready-made answers, but as spiritual keys that open pathways inside your own heart. There is a deep contrast between the way we, as human beings, use words and the way Jesus offered them to the world. We live surrounded by noise from outside, but also noise from within, opinions, fears, racing thoughts, other people's expectations, the demands of daily life. Sometimes there is so much noise that we nearly forget the sound of our own essence. And yet, Jesus walked through the world like someone who understood that real power isn't in the quantity of what is said, but in the truth carried behind each word. In a time marked by conflict, judgment, uncertainty, and unrest, he didn't choose the path of excess. On the contrary, he stepped away whenever necessary. He sought silent hillsides, empty dawns, quiet shores, places where the soul could breathe without distraction. There, in the silence, he renewed his spirit and aligned his mission. And it wasn't just a spiritual practice, it was a teaching, a reminder that silence is not absence, but presence, not emptiness, but fertile ground where God whispers what the world's noise tries to erase. This silence, so essential to Jesus, was also honored by philosophers, mystics, and ancient sages. Many believed that truth doesn't shout. It reveals itself softly, like water flowing between stones, always finding the right way through. And Jesus knew this. That's why, when he spoke, his words carried the weight of someone who had listened deeply. Every phrase was a spiritual arrow. It struck the center, not the surface. It transformed. It didn't just explain. Words don't change the world. Understanding them does. This thought has survived through centuries because we still need it. We can repeat inspiring phrases endlessly, but if we don't let them touch our awareness, we remain lost in the same place. Jesus didn't speak to impress. He spoke to awaken. And when he wanted to transform someone, he said only what was essential. It was so when he said, "Come." A short word, yet one that opened the way for miracles, trust, and surrender. It was so when he said, "Forgive," a word that freed hearts burdened for years by unbearable weights. It was so when he said, "Do not fear," a call to courage, to faith, and to remembering that God is present even when everything seems to fall apart. It was so when he said, "I am," a declaration of divine identity, but also a reminder that something eternal sustains all that exists. Jesus chose his words the way someone lights a lamp in a dark house. He didn't need to brighten the whole place at once. He illuminated one point, one focus, one direction. The light did the rest. That's how he guided weary souls, souls that no longer knew where to go. And in the same way, that's what he does with you now. He lights a way so you can see the next step, even if the rest of the road is still in shadows. And this is where your inner journey begins, because the words he gives, including the 3 you're about to receive, are not just spiritual concepts. They are pathways. They are maps that reveal themselves as you walk. They are doors that open when you decide to cross through them. 2 people can hear the same word and experience completely different transformations because every soul interprets it through its own wounds, dreams, and battles. Maybe you're here because you feel like you've been walking through a dark valley where everything seems uncertain. Maybe you're carrying a worry that grows silently. Maybe you've run out of strength. Or maybe you've been waiting for a sign without telling anyone. And without realizing it, your soul has been asking for a light that can't be explained, only felt, a light recognized even with closed eyes. That's why the first word Jesus gives us isn't just an invitation, it's a calling. A calling to return to your center, to remember who you are, to rediscover the strength fear tried to erase. A calling you can only hear once your heart quiets the world enough to finally listen to the voice that never left your side. There are moments when everything inside us feels disorganized, as if parts of us are trying to rebuild themselves while others insist on falling apart. That's when we search for answers, signs, any direction that helps us breathe again. And it's exactly there in those internal places that Jesus often meets us, not when we're strong, but when we're fragile, not when we're certain, but when we're lost. That's why the 3 words he gives now don't arrive as commands. They arrive as an embrace, not as demands, but as light. And the first of them is trust. Trust. Such a short word, yet it invites an inner surrender. Not a surrender of giving up, but a surrender of letting go into the divine, into the flow of life, into a purpose that is still unfolding. When Jesus calmed the storm, his disciples were terrified. The sea roared, the wind beat against them, the boat nearly capsized, and yet he slept. That image startled everyone around him. How could someone rest while everything seemed to fall apart? And when they finally woke him, he did something simple. He stood up and calmed the sea. Then he asked, "Why are you afraid?" That question is deeper than it seems. Jesus wasn't scolding. He was inviting them to understand that trust isn't born from the absence of the storm, but from his presence in it. To trust is to release what we cannot control, to breathe when answers aren't there, to stand firm even when the ground seems to shift. Like a sailor who knows the restless sea, he doesn't control the waves, but he controls his inner compass, the faith that keeps him steady. Trust is that quiet movement that transforms fear into courage, not because everything is fine, but because you know you're not alone. But trusting is not always easy. Sometimes we feel like everything is about to collapse. Relationships, health, finances, direction in life. And what Jesus asks of us is precisely the thing that feels impossible. Still, he keeps whispering, "Trust. Trust even when logic says otherwise. Trust even when the timing seems off. Trust even when your heart is tired, because trusting is allowing God to work in territories our hands can't reach." The second word Jesus gives is remain, remain. This word carries a spiritual depth that transcends eras. Jesus often used living metaphors to describe the soul: roots, paths, seeds, trees, vines. And at one point, he said something that still echoes today: remain in me. He didn't say, visit me when you need something. He said, remain. Remaining is different from being. Remaining means becoming rooted. It means developing spiritual depth. It means keeping your heart aligned with purpose, even when the world tries to pull you out of the soil. The philosophy of remaining involves consistency, resilience, and maturity. It's not about brute strength, but inner steadiness. It's like a tree that remains standing even when the wind howls, trying to tear it from the ground. The tree doesn't fight the wind. It yields, bends, but it does not disconnect from the earth that sustains it. To remain spiritually is like that. It's staying connected to what's true, even when everything around you changes. It's resisting when giving up looks easier. It's trusting that the silent process is also sacred. When Jesus says, remain, he is asking you not to let go of your faith in the darkest hour, because it's in the dark that the roots grow. He is asking you not to disconnect from the light just because the night seems long, not to abandon the journey just because the path has narrowed. Remaining is a spiritual act of deep courage. It is silently saying, I choose to stay even when life tries to move me. And by staying, you discover you were growing the whole time, even when you felt still. And now we reach the third word, the deepest, the most challenging, the most transformative: love. Love. Within this word lives the very essence of the gospel. Jesus didn't just speak about love, he embodied it. He healed because he loved. He forgave because he loved. He welcomed, taught, guided, sacrificed, because love was his language, his purpose, his nature. When he said, love one another, he wasn't proposing a moral rule. He was pointing to the highest path a human soul can walk. Conscious love is a creative force. It gives meaning to what we do, illuminates what we feel, and transforms what we carry. But love isn't always a gentle gesture. Love is an act of courage. It is offering light even when the night seems to have won. It is opening your heart even when it has been wounded. It is choosing compassion when the world chooses hardness. Love is not weakness. It is spiritual maturity. It is the soul saying, I refuse to be shaped by fear. In times of pain, rejection, or uncertainty, love may feel impossible. But those are the very moments when love becomes most powerful. Because love is not sustained by circumstances, but by the spirituality that gave rise to it. Love is like a light that persists, even in the deepest night. You can cover the light for a while, but it insists. It finds openings. It prevails. And here is something that may touch you deeply. The three words from Jesus are not separate. They form a single spiritual path. Trust is the first step, because without trust you cannot surrender. Remain is the journey, because without remaining you do not mature. Love is the destination, because without love you are not transformed. These three words are like threads woven together into the fabric of the soul. When you trust, something inside you becomes still. When you remain, something inside you grows strong. When you love, something inside you lights up. And suddenly, life begins to change. Not because circumstances changed, but because you did. Now that you've received the three words, we can go deeper still, how to live them day by day, where real life happens, where pain happens, where the soul is truly shaped. Spirituality only becomes complete when it reaches our everyday life, when it descends from the heights of inspiration and settles into the ordinary places where life actually happens. It's easy to feel peace while listening to beautiful words. The hard part is sustaining that peace when reality calls us to silent battles. That's why the three words, trust, remain, love, weren't given as abstract ideas, but as ways of living. They are a spiritual map that can guide each step, each decision, each breath on days when everything feels heavy. When we speak of trusting, we're referring to an inner shift that changes how you deal with anxiety. Anxiety comes from trying to control tomorrow, predict the unpredictable, and guarantee what was never in our hands. To trust is to free yourself from the illusion of total control. It is taking a deep breath and saying, "Today, I do my part. What is beyond that, I surrender." When you trust, life stops being a desperate sprint and becomes a possible path. Even if uncertainty remains, your heart finds solid ground. Trusting also reaches moments of loss of people, opportunities, and paths we imagined taking. The pain of loss always tries to whisper that everything is over, that nothing makes sense anymore. But trusting is remembering that where the heart sees an end, God sees a continuation. It is understanding that life reorganizes itself, even when we cannot see how. Trust doesn't erase the pain, but it prevents pain from becoming all that exists. The second word, remain, finds its greatest power in the moments that invite you to quit. There are times when life's winds blow so hard that our purpose begins to wobble. It's when you've tried so long and nothing seems to work. It's when you're fighting for yourself, but exhaustion keeps showing up. It's when doubt arrives and asks, is it really worth continuing? Remaining is answering, yes, it is. Remaining is the art of staying firm even when the ground trembles. Jesus taught that deep roots matter more than tall branches. A tree that survives a storm is not the prettiest, it is the most rooted. So are we. Remaining means honoring the process, even when it's slow. It means not abandoning the path just because it grew quiet. It means understanding that spiritual maturity is born in the days when nothing seems to happen. While you remain, God works behind the scenes, and then we reach the word that both heals and challenges, love. Loving in times of pain is perhaps the greatest act of human courage. Loving when you've been hurt, loving when you've been rejected, loving when the world feels too harsh. Love does not ask you to ignore your pain. It asks you not to become it. To love is to refuse to return darkness to a world that gave you darkness. It is transforming what you received, like light emerging after the longest night. In times of financial uncertainty, love may feel distant, but it also appears as compassion toward yourself, the patience to deal with your own limitations, the humility to ask for help when needed. Love is treating yourself as someone worthy of care, even when challenges try to convince you otherwise. By uniting the three words, trust, remain, love, you create within yourself a spiritual territory where transformation occurs not suddenly, but gradually. Something shifts when you begin to trust a little more. Something deepens when you decide to remain. Something brightens when you choose love. It's not an immediate change, but a silent process that reshapes your way of living over time. Maybe you're living something right now that requires one of these words. Maybe you're facing a moment that calls for courage, steadiness, or compassion. And maybe that's why you're here today, not by accident, but by the need of the soul. Because Jesus continues calling softly, offering direction when your heart feels lost. Next, we'll enter an even more intimate space, a direct encounter with Jesus within your heart, where these three words come alive. Close your eyes for a moment and let your breath settle into a slower, softer rhythm, almost as if aligning itself with God's timing. Now imagine Jesus standing before you, not as a distant figure, not as someone unreachable, but as someone who knows exactly what you feel, every hidden fear, every unspoken desire, every tear you held back so you wouldn't burden anyone. He looks at you with a tenderness that doesn't ask for explanations, a tenderness that understands before you speak. Imagine this silent encounter. His hands rest gently over your heart, not to demand anything, not to point out failures, but to remind you of what has always been there inside you, the ability to trust, the strength to remain, and the light to love. He does not speak these words as a teacher giving a lesson. He gives them as someone returning something you lost along the way. Trust. He says it looking straight into you, not so you ignore the pain, but so it doesn't become larger than God's presence in your story. Remain. He says it touching the parts of you that still tremble, reminding you that you don't need to be perfect, you just need to continue. Love. He says it with a softness that melts all resistance, as if he knows this is the word that heals, frees, and transforms the most. Now let these three words echo inside your being. Feel them settling in places where there used to be doubt, fear, or confusion. Feel how they calm what was agitated, illuminate what was dark, and strengthen what felt too fragile. Jesus looks at you once more and smiles, that timeless smile that says without sound, "I am with you." It is not a conditional promise, it is a permanent spiritual truth. And as this moment fades, he doesn't walk away. He remains in your awareness, guiding, inspiring, sustaining you. The reflection born from this encounter is deep, intimate, and transformative. It prepares your heart for the final step, where we integrate everything into a greater, wider, and higher spiritual vision. Looking back at everything said, felt, and awakened so far, it becomes clear that the three words given by Jesus form not just a spiritual teaching, but a complete journey, an invisible track that leads us back to ourselves while lifting us towards something greater. Trust, remain, and love are not simply instruction. They are states of consciousness, inner movements that shape the way we walk through life. Each holds a depth that only reveals itself fully when lived with sincerity, surrender, and an awakened heart. Trust is the first step because it puts your soul back in the right place. When we trust, we rise out of silent despair and return to our center. Trust creates space for God where fear once ruled. It reminds us that we aren't crossing life alone, that a sacred presence walks with us even when we don't notice. To trust doesn't mean denying the chaos. It means refusing to let chaos have the final word. Trust is the lamp lit in the dark room of uncertainty. Small, perhaps, but enough to keep you moving. Remain is the second step because it sustains the journey. All of us have begun paths with excitement, but remaining is what reveals maturity. Jesus never promised easy roads, but he promised to walk them with us. Remaining means enduring time, embracing the process, accepting that growth isn't always visible. It means understanding that the soul's roots deepen precisely when the outside world feels too quiet. Remaining protects the purpose that haste might destroy. It guards your heart from abandoning what God is still building. Love is the destination, the highest expression of who we truly are. To love is to choose light in the darkness, to reach out when retreating would be easier, to extend compassion in a world that often chooses hardness. Love is what makes life truly human and truly divine. Jesus knew this. Love was never just emotion. It was his posture, his way of being. To love is to build bridges where walls once stood, to heal without demanding anything back, to become a channel of God for someone else, and in doing so, noticing your own soul being healed. When we unite these three words, we see something even deeper. They describe the human journey itself. We trust while facing uncertainty. We remain while fighting our battles. We love while searching for meaning in our hopes. None of these dimensions is simple, but all are necessary for a life of depth and purpose. Jesus didn't give shortcuts. He gave pathways that require courage, presence, and daily choice. Perhaps that is the greatest lesson. God doesn't transform our life only when everything changes outside. He transforms it when something changes inside us. When we start trusting a bit more, remaining a bit more steady, loving a bit more deeply. And suddenly, what seemed impossible begins to move. What looked lost begins to rebuild. What felt too hard begins to soften. May these three words find a home in your soul. May they become quiet companions in difficult days, soft light in confusing nights, and steady direction in moments of doubt. May you let Jesus walk with you, not just today, but in each step from here on. And may living these words lead you into a new way of being, lighter, deeper, more aligned with the purpose God whispers into your heart. Now we step into the final moment, where everything becomes invitation, dialogue, and continuation. Thank you for walking with me until now, for allowing your soul to breathe through words that don't just speak, they touch, comfort, and transform. Nothing you heard is a distant theory. Everything is a seed that can grow within you. And maybe you already feel it, a gentle calm, almost imperceptible, but present. A sense that Jesus really gave you something today, something simple yet powerful, something that can guide you through hard days and light your steps when the path feels too narrow. This is a special moment because it's here at the end that you realize you were never truly alone. The words trust, remain, and love aren't just teachings, they are presences. They are lighthouses Jesus lights within you so that even when the world darkens, you can still see your way. And everyone who reached this point now carries a quiet calling, a divine invitation to live with more awareness, more depth, and more love. So let me ask you a question, one that may change how you walk away from this video. Which of the three words did Jesus place on your heart today? Was it trust, because you're facing something that requires surrender? Was it remain, because your path needs steadiness and patience? Or was it love, because some wound inside you is longing for healing and light? Write it in the comments. Share your experience. Your word might touch someone going through exactly what you are. And when you comment, you don't just participate, you help transform. You become part of the spiritual current this message hopes to create. If this message spoke to you, if Jesus touched your heart through these words, subscribe to the channel. It's not just a technical gesture, it's a way to walk together, to keep receiving messages that nourish the soul, to strengthen a community searching for light in the midst of life. Also leave a like, not out of obligation, but as a sign that this reflection meant something to you. Your support helps this message reach someone who may be on the edge of their strength, needing exactly these 3 words. And as we say goodbye for now, I want to leave you with something to accompany your next steps, especially on the quiet days, especially on the difficult ones. May the light of Jesus continue to guide your steps, especially on the days when you can't see the path. He is with you. He always has been. And now, in some way, you know that too.